Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast. For today's deep dive, I want to start by asking you, the listener, to just imagine something for a second.
Oh boy, setting the stage right away.
Yeah, I am. Because right now, literally all over the world, we are actively vaporizing highly toxic heavy metals into the atmosphere.
Just launching them straight up there.
Exactly. We're taking significant amounts of mercury and we're sending it directly into the air we breathe. And from there, it drifts, it settles into the soil, it washes into our waterways, and it permanently bioaccumulates in our food chain.
Right. And the really crazy part about this is that it's not from some, shady, unregulated industrial factory.
No, not at all. We are doing this every single day in almost every city on Earth, basically in the name of honoring our dead.
It is, without a doubt, one of the most overlooked ecological realities of modern society. I mean, we spent the last few decades optimizing, everything.
Yeah, totally. Electric cars, recycling, all of it.
Right, making everything cleaner, more sustainable. But the second we approach end-of-life disposition, we completely look the other way. We default to this extreme brute force thermal mechanics just because, well, it's what we've always done.
Which brings us to the actual mission of today's deep dive. And I'm speaking directly to you, the listener, here. We know right off the bat that this is a heavy subject.
Definitely. It's not standard dinner table conversation.
No, it touches on the most personal, universally shared human vulnerability we have. It's wrapped up in grief, in tradition, and let's just be honest, a huge amount of deliberate avoidance.
People just don't want to think about it.
Right. But today, we're looking at a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
We're looking at a fascinating source essay today called Water Cremation Explained, a gentle alternative to fire.
And it is a genuinely revolutionary alternative.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to break down the advanced chemistry that makes it possible, right? The staggering environmental reasons for moving away from fire and how it's basically rewriting how families deal with grief and logistics.
Because the disruption here isn't just a new piece of technology, it's deeply sociological. It's a clash between our hyper-industrialized death care system and a sudden, scientifically driven pivot back toward the elemental.
Yeah, back to nature. So let's jump right into the deepest end of the pool. Because I think the first hurdle anyone faces with this concept is it's the vocabulary.
Words matter a lot, especially when people are grieving.
They really do. And the source text uses three entirely different terms interchangeably. It says alkaline hydrolysis, water cremation, and aquamation. And honestly, as someone just trying to understand this, that terminology gives me a serious case of cognitive whiplash.
I get that. The terminology is fractured because the industry is, they're fighting this active battle between scientific precision and emotional accessibility.
Right, because when I hear alkaline hydrolysis, my brain instantly pictures a cold, sterile laboratory.
Hazard suits and beakers.
Exactly. It sounds like a hazardous waste protocol. It's just so clinical it feels alienating. But then you hear water cremation, which is, it's almost a poetic contradiction. Cremation means fire.
And then there's aquamation.
Yeah, which honestly sounds like a high-end spa treatment.
It really does.
So you have this massive spectrum of language for one physical event. But I want to push back on the clinical phrasing for a second. If we strip away the intimidating syllables of alkaline hydrolysis, aren't we basically just describing the natural breakdown of a fallen tree in a damp forest, but sped up inside a machine?
What's fascinating here is that you just nailed the exact mechanism. Breaking down the etymology of that intimidating phrase is the key to demystifying the whole thing.
Okay, so break it down for us.
Let's look at the science of hydrolysis. Hydro obviously refers to water, and lysis is a Greek suffix meaning to unbind or to loosen or cleave apart.
So literally unbinding with water.
Exactly. Hydrolysis is the act of using water to break complex chemical bonds. So in nature, if an organism falls onto a slightly alkaline, damp patch of earth, the moisture and the naturally occurring basic compounds slowly dismantle it.
Right, over years and decades.
Yeah, it unbinds the proteins, the fats, the tissues, returning them to their base elemental building blocks.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
So,
It's just the fundamental loop of biology.
precisely. This technology doesn't reinvent the wheel at all. It just optimizes the environment. It takes that exact same natural chemical reaction and adds highly controlled variables.
Like what kind of variables?
Calibrated water flow, precise alkalinity, and thermodynamics. So it achieves in just a few hours what a damp forest floor does over years. It's high-level biomimicry.
But wait, if it's just accelerating a natural process, why do we even need the phrase water cremation? I mean, for you listening, think about your immediate gut reaction to the word cremation. You picture fire.
Unavoidable.
Right. So isn't water cremation just a massive oxymoron? Why attach this entirely new water-based tech to a word that literally means destruction by extreme heat?
It's a deliberate psychological bridge. You really have to understand the massive cultural inertia around death care. In moments of shock and grief, the human brain just desperately wants the familiar.
Because anything foreign is terrifying in that state.
Exactly. If you introduce a completely foreign concept with a sterile scientific name, families will reject it. Full stop. But over the last century, the word cremation has slowly shifted in the public mind.
Shifted how?
It went from strictly meaning burning a body to basically meaning a process that gives us ashes back.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
So by attaching water to cremation, you are promising the family the final outcome they expect, the ashes, while just gently changing the mechanism of how you get there.
That is a brilliant negotiation with human psychology. You offer a radically different journey, but promise the exact same destination.
Yeah.
But that brings up the stark physical difference between combustion and dissolution. Because, look, we are so used to fire. We cook with it, we heat our homes with it. But when we talk about human remains, fire is inherently, undeniably violent.
It's the absolute definition of a violent, high-energy event. Traditional cremation relies on thermal oxidation.
Which means burning it up.
Right. You introduce massive raw energy to forcibly break molecular bonds. It's sheer destruction. A modern crematory uses these roaring industrial gas burners that create immense localized trauma to the organic material.
And the source text clearly positions water cremation against that violence.
Mhm.
It deliberately uses phrases like a soft, eco-friendly transformation.
In a controlled and dignified environment.
Yes. It feels so necessary to emphasize that gentleness. When someone you love dies, your instinct is to protect them. The thought of putting their body into thousands of degrees of fire can be deeply distressing.
Subconsciously, it really bothers a lot of people, and that's why the shift to water is so emotionally potent. It fundamentally alters the narrative the family holds in their minds.
They aren't picturing an industrial furnace anymore.
No, they visualize a quiet, warm, fluid environment. Water yields, it surrounds, it gently dismantles. The psychological relief of that is massive. It aligns the physical reality with the desire to handle the person with care.
Okay, let's pull back the curtain on that physical reality, though. Here's where it gets really interesting, because to truly grasp this, we have to look inside the machine itself.
The mechanics of it.
Yeah. If we completely remove the extreme heat of the fire, how exactly does this vessel achieve the same structural breakdown? Walk me through the actual sequential mechanics of an alkaline hydrolysis unit.
The engineering is surprisingly elegant, but it relies on tight chemistry. First, the body goes into a specialized sealed vessel, usually made of heavy-duty stainless steel.
Yeah, picture a sleek steel chamber.
Right. Once secured, it's filled with a carefully calculated solution, and the ratio is critical here. It's about 95% water and 5% alkaline chemicals.
Let me pause you on the alkaline chemicals for a second, because the second people hear chemicals dissolving a body, they instantly imagine, like, a vat of boiling acid from a mob movie.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very common misconception.
So we need to explicitly clear this up. This is not an acid, right?
It is the exact opposite of an acid on the pH scale. An acid works by aggressively donating protons, which causes that corrosive burning reaction.
The acid burn.
Yeah. The alkaline chemicals used here, usually potassium hydroxide, sodium hydroxide, or a blend of both, are strong bases. They don't burn. They introduce hydroxide ions into the water, which seek out and unbind the specific bonds holding organic material together.
Okay, so we have 95% water, 5% alkaline solution, and the body and the vessel. What's the catalyst? Because we said a forest floor takes years.
The catalyst is thermodynamics, moderate heat and sustained pressure. The liquid inside is heated to somewhere between 300 and 350 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wait, hold on. Water boils at 212 degrees. How is it sitting at 350 without turning entirely into steam and blowing the vessel apart?
And that is where the pressure comes into play. The vessel is highly pressurized. Basic laws of thermodynamics dictate that if you increase pressure in a sealed environment, you significantly raise the boiling point of the liquid.
Oh, so the pressure actively stops it from boiling.
Precisely, and that's critical. If it turned to steam, the hydrolysis process would just stop. The chemical reaction needs continuous physical interaction between the liquid and the organic tissue.
Wow. So it's essentially functioning on the exact same scientific principle as a kitchen pressure cooker.
Yes, just engineered on a highly advanced industrial scale for a very specific chemical application. The superheated alkaline water continuously circulates around the body for several hours.
And it just starts unzipping the molecules.
Systematically, on a molecular level, the hydroxide ions attack the peptide bonds holding protein chains together. They break down into smaller peptides and eventually into basic amino acids.
What about fats? Because the human body is incredibly complex.
It handles all organic matter. Fats undergo saponification. The alkaline environment turns lipids into simple soaps, salts of fatty acids, and glycerol. Carbohydrates become simple sugars. Even the DNA and RNA are completely cleaved apart into basic nucleobases.
That is just staggering to think about. It takes the absolute unimaginable complexity of human biology and methodically unzips every chemical zipper until nothing complex is left.
Unzipping is the perfect way to visualize it, and at the end of the cycle, what remains is a completely sterile, benign liquid. Just water, salts, sugars, amino acids, and peptides.
So there's no biological material left at all, no DNA.
None. No pathogens, no DNA. It's a nutrient-rich liquid that is perfectly safe to be returned to the standard wastewater treatment cycle,
Yeah.
just like any other biological byproduct.
And here is the huge paradox that stuns people. The liquid isn't the final product the family receives. We've just described a pressurized water system. It's completely different from a 1900-degree gas furnace.
Entirely different.
Yet the output handed back to the grieving family is described as exactly the same. How is it physically possible that both water and extreme fire result in a box of ashes?
Because in both methods, the goal is the complete removal of organic material. What remains in the vessel, entirely untouched by the hydrolysis process, is the inorganic mineral structure.
The skeleton.
Exactly. The bone matrix, which is primarily calcium phosphate.
So when people look at cremated ashes, they aren't actually looking at carbon ash, like from a fireplace.
Not at all. Whether you burn a body or dissolve the tissue with water, the carbon-based organic matter is stripped away. In a fire, it violently combusts and goes up the smokestack as CO2 and vapor. In water cremation, it dissolves into the liquid.
But the bones survive both.
Yes. The calcium phosphate doesn't dissolve in the alkaline solution. The bone fragments remain structurally intact, though they're completely clean of organic tissue and very brittle.
So what happens to them after the liquid is drained?
They're carefully removed, rinsed, and dried. From there, it's just like traditional cremation. The brittle bones go into a mechanical processor, which pulverizes them into that fine powder we colloquially call ashes.
Preserving that final artifact, the urn filled with ashes, feels like the entire reason this tech is viable. If you invented a better environmental process, but handed the family a vial of sterile liquid, society would reject it immediately.
Unquestionably. We are ritualistic creatures. We rely on physical touchstones to process grief. We know what an urn is. We understand scattering ashes on a mountain.
Right, it's familiar.
By giving families the ashes, water cremation integrates this novel technology straight into existing mourning rituals. It completely removes the barrier to entry.
It's brilliant, but let me play the skeptic for a second. If the final product on the mantelpiece is exactly the same, and flame cremation has worked for over a century, why disrupt the industry?
It's a fair question.
Building these steel pressure vessels, managing alkaline solutions, retraining workers, that's a massive shift. Why go through all that effort just to get the same urn? And the answer is the absolute driver of this movement, the undeniable ecological imperative.
The environmental footprint of modern death care is immense, and it's largely ignored. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the sheer physics of flame-based cremation.
Let's lay out the data. Because for you listening, when someone says greenhouse gases, your mind goes to highways or factory farming. It's really hard to conceptualize funerals as a major climate change contributor. Are we just splitting hairs here, or is it statistically significant?
It's remarkably significant when you extrapolate it globally. Just look at the energy consumption of one single traditional cremation.
Okay, walk me through the numbers.
To completely combust human tissue, a furnace must maintain between 1,500 and 1,900 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 3 hours.
Maintaining 1900 degrees for 3 hours.
Yeah.
That takes a massive fuel source.
Almost exclusively natural gas. One traditional cremation consumes roughly 28 to 30 gallons of fuel.
Yeah.
That's the energy equivalent of driving an average car about 500 miles. Now multiply that. In the U.S. alone, well over half of all people who pass away are cremated. We're talking millions of cremations annually.
So tens of millions of gallons of fossil fuels burned every year just for disposition.
And it isn't just the fuel consumption, it's the emissions.
Hmm.
Burning that gas plus the thermal oxidation of the body itself releases a massive amount of CO2. One flame cremation emits an estimated 500 to 540 pounds of carbon dioxide.
500 pounds.
Yes. Scaled globally, the death care industry is a massive, unquestioned source of greenhouse gases.
Which puts the eco-friendly claim of water cremation in sharp perspective. Because water cremation doesn't use gas burners at all.
It requires electricity to heat the water to 350 degrees and run the pumps, but the energy draw is just a fraction of a gas furnace. The carbon footprint is estimated to be 75% to 90% lower, and there are zero direct emissions. No fire, no smokestack, no CO2 from tissue destruction.
But the carbon footprint isn't even the most immediate environmental threat. We hinted at this in the intro, and we really need to dig into it. The reality of vaporized heavy metals.
The mercury cycle. It is the most critical, least discussed hazard in modern death care.
When I first saw the data on mercury emissions from crematories, I was so confused. Why is there elemental mercury inside a funeral home furnace? And then it clicked. We aren't just burning organic tissue, we're burning the accumulated physical interventions of a human lifetime.
We are burning dental amalgams. For generations, the standard of care for cavities was a silver-colored amalgam, which is roughly 50% elemental mercury.
And it's stable while it's in your mouth, right?
Very stable. But it reacts very differently to extreme thermodynamics.
Because mercury has a relatively low boiling point for a metal.
Exactly. It vaporizes at around 674 degrees Fahrenheit. So when a body with amalgam fillings goes into a furnace at 1900 degrees, that mercury doesn't just melt. It instantly and violently flashes into a vapor.
It becomes a highly toxic gas.
Mm.
And because crematories need smokestacks to vent exhaust, that vaporized mercury just goes straight up into the open atmosphere.
Yes. Some highly advanced modern facilities have scrubbers to capture some of it, but a vast number of older facilities worldwide have absolutely no mechanism to capture aerosolized heavy metals.
It just goes into the air.
Yeah.
And what happens then? It doesn't magically disappear.
Not at all. Mercury is an element. It can't be destroyed. It drifts on air currents, and eventually it precipitates. It rains back down onto the earth, settling into lakes, rivers, and oceans.
And then it enters the food chain.
Exactly. Microorganisms convert it into methylmercury, which is incredibly toxic and highly bioavailable. Small fish eat the organisms, large predatory fish like tuna eat the small fish, and the mercury bioaccumulates in their tissue.
It is a direct, unbroken chain from a crematory smokestack in a quiet suburban neighborhood straight into the global food supply.
It's a systemic environmental failure, and it's also an immediate occupational hazard for the workers.
Right. We always focus on the grieving family, but we never think about the crematory operator.
Think about their daily working conditions. Managing high-heat industrial furnaces exposed to radiant heat stress, particulate blowback, carbon monoxide, and the continuous risk of inhaling trace, vaporized heavy metals every time they open a retort door.
It's a hazardous industrial job masquerading as a solemn duty. And water cremation solves this heavy metal crisis entirely through its chemistry. Because it operates at 350 degrees, well below mercury's 674-degree vaporization point, the dental amalgams stay stable.
Precisely. They never aerosolize. The alkaline solution dissolves the tissue around the teeth, and the solid mercury amalgams just fall to the bottom of the vessel with the bone fragments.
Where they can be safely recovered and sent to a specialized recycling facility. It completely severs the link between human disposition and mercury toxicity.
Which brings up a really fascinating philosophical point about sustainability. For 30 years, the environmental movement has focused on how we live. You recycle, compost, buy solar panels, try to shrink your daily carbon footprint.
You try to be a good steward of the earth.
Right. But then, under the traditional model, your final act upon leaving the Earth is burning 30 gallons of fossil fuels and emitting hundreds of pounds of greenhouse gases.
It's a jarring contradiction.
Water cremation resolves that. It extends sustainability beyond the threshold of life, letting your final footprint align with the values you held while alive.
It's incredible how we went from macro-level atmospheric bioaccumulation right back down to deep personal values. And I want to zoom in even further now, because while the planetary benefits are huge, this shift also rewrites the logistical reality for the family. We need to talk about decoupling disposition from memorialization.
This is where the sociological impact truly shines, the gift of flexibility.
So what does this all mean? Let's analyze the traditional timeline of death, because it operates like a total tyranny. When someone dies, the biological clock starts ticking loudly.
Biology demands immediate action.
Whether it's embalming for a burial or rushing to a flame cremation, the body must be dealt with swiftly. And because our culture ties the physical disposition directly to the emotional service, families are shoved into this high-pressure, compressed timeline.
Usually a standard 5 to 7 day window.
It's a logistical nightmare layered on top of acute shock. Think about it. In under a week, you have to navigate shattering grief, notify everyone, make massive, irreversible financial decisions on caskets or urns, plan a catered event, write a eulogy, and coordinate international travel.
It's a recipe for severe trauma and financial regret. The brain in acute grief is biologically incapable of making sound decisions. Yet the traditional model forces families to make thousands of dollars worth of logistical choices while completely compromised.
But the gentle nature of water cremation disrupts that pressure cooker. By altering how the disposition is handled, it completely decouples the physical necessity from the emotional gathering.
Because the alkaline hydrolysis is handled quietly and safely behind the scenes, the physical transition is completed. The sterile bone fragments are processed, the ashes are in an urn, and the moment that's done, the ticking clock just stops.
It buys families the most precious resource you can possibly have in grief: time.
It gives them space to breathe, to just exist in their grief without project managing an event. The physical imperative is resolved so they can focus on the emotional imperative.
And with modern families, that time is essential. 100 years ago, everyone lived in the same town. A swift funeral made logistical sense. But today, families are fractured all over the globe.
You might have a mother pass in New York, a child in London, a sibling in California.
Under the traditional model, they drop everything, buy panic-priced international flights, and show up jet-lagged and hollowed out just to attend a service 3 days later. They are physically present, but emotionally destroyed by the logistics.
By decoupling the timeline, water cremation lets them pause. They handle the disposition, and then they can collectively say, let's hold a celebration of life in 6 months. Let's wait for summer, request time off properly, and process the shock first.
It changes the whole paradigm from a frantic crisis response to a thoughtful planning model.
Yeah.
You can curate a memorial that actually reflects the joy of their life.
Gather photos, write thoughtful speeches, rent a beautiful park pavilion.
Exactly. Not just whatever local funeral parlor had an opening on a random Tuesday. But this raises an important question. We've established the rigorous chemistry, the environmental necessity, and the emotional grace. Yet water cremation isn't universally adopted. How does a society fundamentally rewire its approach to something as entrenched as death care?
It happens slowly, and you have to fight on multiple fronts. The first battlefield is the regulatory and legal landscape.
Because despite the safety, alkaline hydrolysis isn't legal everywhere yet.
It's a patchwork. In the U.S., it's state by state. Over half the states have legalized it, but there's still fierce debate in the rest. And the pushback rarely comes from scientific or environmental concerns. It's almost entirely rooted in cultural discomfort and subjective ideas of dignity.
I really want to dig into that concept of dignity. Because how do you legislate dignity? Who arbitrarily decides what is respectful?
It's a tough sociological issue. Opponents weaponize the language. They revert to fear-mongering about dissolving a loved one in acid, or they claim flushing the sterile liquid is a desecration. They argue it lacks the solemnity of burial or the finality of fire.
But that argument is so hypocritical when you look at the alternatives. Is it somehow more dignified to pump a body full of carcinogenic formaldehyde, seal it in steel, and drop it in a concrete vault to decay over decades?
Or to vaporize dental mercury in a 1900-degree inferno?
Exactly. Tradition provides this massive psychological shield. We accept the grotesque realities of traditional burial simply because they're old. We scrutinize water cremation harshly because it's new.
Novelty invites scrutiny. And the only way to dismantle that visceral yuck factor is through relentless, proactive education. Which is why educational platforms like the Funeral Program site are so critical to this movement.
Because legalization is only half the battle. Just because a state signs a bill doesn't mean families will suddenly demand it.
Exactly. If a family has never heard of aquamation, they won't ask for it during a crisis. They'll default to what they know. The industry desperately needs non-judgmental resources to bridge that gap. Organizations that intercept a family provide clear facts, explain the environmental benefits without being preachy, and gently offer a new path.
Education transforms a terrifying unknown into a comforting choice. And we've seen this exact cultural trajectory before in death care. Think about the rise of the hospice movement in the 20th century.
Oh, that's a perfect parallel.
Decades ago, the medical establishment viewed death as a failure to be fought at all costs. The idea of hospice stopping aggressive treatments for comfort care at home was viewed with intense suspicion. Some thought it was giving up or accelerating death. It was fringe.
Or look at the green burial movement. Foregoing embalming to be buried in a biodegradable shroud was considered radical and unsanitary by the mainstream industry for a long time.
But in both cases, the science, logic, and profound humanity won out. Once people were educated on the benefits, hospice and natural burials were embraced as deeply humane choices. Water cremation is walking that exact same arduous path.
And what makes its appeal so culturally powerful is the profound dichotomy at its heart. You have two very distinct groups drawn to this for different reasons. On one side, people drawn to the rigorous science, the thermodynamics, alkalinity, measurable carbon reduction, and cold, hard logic.
Right. But on the other side, you have people who don't care about the chemistry at all. They're drawn to it because it satisfies an ancient, almost spiritual desire. Water is universally recognized across cultures as the ultimate symbol of purity in life.
Returning to the earth via a warm fluid feels infinitely more organic than an industrial fire.
It's the ultimate fusion of the highly engineered and the deeply elemental. It uses the pinnacle of modern pressurized thermodynamics and chemistry to perfectly mimic the oldest biological cycle on Earth. It removes the violence, the pollution, and does it without sacrificing an ounce of dignity.
It really is a remarkable achievement.
Which brings us to the end of our incredibly vast journey today. We've covered an immense amount of ground, diving deep into the literal mechanics of human dissolution.
We started with the intimidating terminology of alkaline hydrolysis and found the gentle, natural process hiding underneath.
We unpack the stark environmental realities, moving past the buzzwords to the hard data, eliminating thousands of gallons of fossil fuel, reducing massive CO2 emissions, and stopping the vaporization of toxic heavy metals like dental mercury into our food supply.
We recognized it's not just saving the earth, it's actively protecting the death care workers operating the machinery.
And we explored the profound emotional and logistical grace it provides to grieving families. Breaking that tyrannical biological clock and decoupling disposition from memorialization gives families the ultimate gift: the flexibility to pause, breathe, and design a personalized celebration of life on their own terms.
And to you listening to this deep dive right now, we are fully aware that no one enthusiastically clears their schedule to ponder their own mortality. It's the ultimate uncomfortable conversation.
But the purpose here isn't to dwell morbidly on the end. The purpose is empowerment.
Exactly. Knowledge is the ultimate tool for autonomy. When the time comes, for yourself or someone you love, you aren't blindly bound by ecologically destructive and exhausting traditions. You have the knowledge to make choices that authentically align with your values.
Whether that's environmental stewardship, securing emotional gentleness for your family, or just ensuring your final act is one of quiet integration rather than violent consumption. Knowledge is the antidote to fear, especially when peering into the dark.
Beautifully said.
And we want to leave you today with a final lingering thought to mull over. It builds directly on that fascinating dichotomy we just discussed. We started by noting how modern science often feels clinical, sterile, and disconnected from nature. And we spent an hour detailing how water cremation relies on highly advanced, precise modern engineering to deconstruct the human form.
Pressure vessels, thermodynamics, the works.
Right. But if this pinnacle of hyper-modern scientific achievement perfectly mirrors and gently accelerates the elemental ancient process of a body returning quietly to the earth via water, does adopting this highly advanced, futuristic technology actually bring our fast-paced, industrialized society closer to our ancient natural roots than we've been in centuries?
Something to think about.
Until next time.